Hey, I'm Alex from Los Angeles.
And this is Karan from San Francisco. Welcome to Movies That Shaped Us, a journey of self discovery through a shared love of film. We are two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but was both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we'll cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through three of our favorite films. We hope these movies and topics are fun and revelatory to you, just like they've been to us. So with that, Alex, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, Karan. So today, our topic is movies that shaped our meaning of friendship. So this is very important relationship in everyone's lives are not people you're related to or in love with. Well, I guess in love with in a certain way. Romantically, you're not in love with them, but they're your friends. So there's a lot of movies over the years that have dealt with friendship bonds, problems with them, great things about them. So today we're going to talk through those films. So I'll just talk about a little bit how I looked at this. So first I started just with thinking about important friends in my life and different phases of my life. Friends that I've had for a long time. Going back 20 plus years from high school. Friends that I was really close to for a period of time, and then no longer really that close to them anymore. And then newer folks that I've met later in life, and just what bonded me to them, what I feel is important to the relationship that I have with these people, how they make me feel, how that hanging out with friends, what that feels like. Again, at various points in my life, like that's how I was kind of looking at the evolution of that. And definitely some great fun films that I was able to revisit. What about you? How do you think about this topic?
Yeah, kind of similarly, sort of started to break down how I see friendship, and what does friendship mean to me, and try to kind of pull apart, for lack of a better word, pillars of my friendship, and tried to find movies that kind of represent that, but also movies that I've watched many, many times over the years. And I've thought about my friends while watching them. So there's like a relationship of specific people as represented by these movies as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I would also say, like, for me up top, I think this was a hard episode only because I didn't grow up with a lot of friends, and this has to do a lot with being an army brat. We moved around a lot, and the kind of relationship I had with my mom, my sister, my dad was very obviously parent child, but also very much like friendship, like especially with my mom. Like my mom has been one of my best friends, so for a long time I didn't really seek out friendships. Friendships for me were mostly hangout situations, and they were these people were sort of at arm's length. So it took me a while to kind of figure out what it means to have a friend, what it means to invest in them. And because I was approaching that a little bit later in my life when I moved to undergrad and was living in a dorm and approaching them very much from like a family lens, it took a while to strike a right balance, because I would basically go from 0 to 200 right away, because I sort of viewed people in that same way, that, oh, you're a family now, so great, here's the red carpet for you. And of course that didn't quite work out very well for me, so it took a bit to sort of modulate what it means to have friends. So this list is going to reflect some of that too, I think.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, and I think that I've felt that a little bit too, in the sense of like strong family bonds. Sometimes you feel like you're getting a lot of what other people might be getting from friends, just from your family. Not that there's anything wrong with either approach. But yeah, like for me too, I think it was especially recently, I just didn't really understand like the value of I had friends, but it was what the value of that was and what that could actually mean, as opposed to just people you share interests with or you like hanging out with and doing certain things with. There definitely is something beyond that, for sure, that it took me till later in life and more recently actually to really understand that, which is something, maybe as I was actually looking through these films, I wonder if it was like a gender thing a little bit too, just like male to male friendships. There is some kind of distance there just because of gender dynamics, that there might not be in, female to female friendships. But yeah, it's good background for both of us then as we jump into these lists. So yeah, why don't you start off with your number 3 film that shaped your views of friendship?
All right. So my number 3 is E.T. from 1982, directed by Steven Spielberg, obviously starring Henry Thomas, Drew Barrymore, Peter Coyote. Quick log line: a troubled child summons the courage to help a friendly alien escape from Earth and return to his home planet. So I put this on my list as kind of representation of the purest form of friendship, if you will, where and that's kind of what children bring. And maybe this can happen in adulthood as well. But to me, this movie is very much about when you find an instant connection with somebody who you didn't grow up with, who's not from your family. It's very unconditional, and without much being said or done, somehow this person can see you better than anybody else that you've known for a long period of your life, and you're willing to do whatever it takes to support them, help them. It's sort of this instant bond, like I said. And I think this movie does such a great job of representing that. I have a childhood memory of watching this movie and just bawling. And I watched it again after a few years in preparation for this movie, and I bawled once again. So nothing has changed really in terms of how this movie portrays friendship between E.T. and Elliot. So yeah, that's why this movie is on my list. I think in many ways, this movie has become like a model of friendship for me, especially from the eyes of a younger person. I don't think I had E.T. Obviously in my life, but I didn't have that kind of friendship in my life. Like I said, I wasn't open to it. I was always so jealous of kids who had friends that they would wanted to spend hours and hours in their life with, and letters are being written even if they're not in the same city, and hours and hours on phone calls. It was almost like they wanted to be with them as opposed to their families. And in a way, I was always jealous of that, but I also felt lucky because I had that in my own house in a way. So it's kind of a complicated sort of sentiment, that comes with it, because I didn't have this. But I think I vicariously lived through Elliot in watching this movie as a kid and seeing, oh, it can be this way. And how cool would that be, But as a movie, I mean, what can I say about E.T. that hasn't been said? Like in our last episode, you talked about Jaws being sort of your best of the best when it comes to Spielberg. I think E.T. might be for me. And a lot of it has to do with when I watched it, in my life and how it's stayed with me. And watching it again this time, I was so blown away by, maybe I talk about this way too much on this podcast, which is how quiet this movie is and how much that appeals to me. And I think it's important because you're really put in the place of this suburban area where these people are living at. You're put in the space of the loneliness of this family because they're the father figure, the husband has just moved out.
Yep.
People are figuring out life, and it's quiet. It's kind of dark, and also it's eerie. Aliens have walked into your space, literally.
Yeah.
And that, as wondrous and awesome and amazing that can be, it's also kind of creepy and eerie. So I think the movie does such a great job of layering all these textures of loneliness and eeriness, and then sprinkling joy and wonderment and people coming together, figuring each other out. And that's why this movie has that power. In anybody else's hand, this movie would be a fun ride, which it is. And that's why kids connect to it too. But there's something so deep and melancholic about this movie, which is why it has that staying power. And the reason why it's my best of his is because I think this is one of the few movies where character, story, effects all come together. That doesn't often happen. It's a very hard thing to do. I think this time around, I was also really struck by the mom character. Not that I hadn't paid attention to her previously, but I really saw like how all over the place she is. She's sort of this representation of anxiety and helplessness, but you see glimmers of love and anger because the husband has left, but also curiosity. But she's also sort of so blind to the fact that there's an ET walking around. It's so amazing. And I think that's so important because it really grounds the movie, her and sort of her being, because if you remove her from the picture, I don't think Elliot's relationship with E.T. would be believable. You wouldn't quite buy why this child is going the extra mile, because the child is detached in this moment in time because of what's happened in this
Oh yeah.
household. The kids are on their own in a way,
Right.
and they're seeking there's love, but there's confusion in the household, and in a way Et comes in and sort of becomes this glue that binds the household back together. So again, just so many layers. Great score once again.
Yeah, fantastic.
Great effects. The Et animatronic thing just holds up even till this date. And then last thing I would say is like, all these little details of engagement between the kids and Et, whether it's the plant or dressing up Et in Drew's clothes, or the phone, or all of it, they're all fun moments, but they chronicle their relationship, and then very soon they become symbolic plot points, because the moment you see the dying plant, you know what that means. And now these things have become memes. So again, so brilliant to use these little moments to add just so much more detail to this friendship that's building as the movie goes on. So yeah, I love Et. It's probably a corny, obvious thing to say, but I love it. And Elliot is the actor who plays Elliot is just incredible. What a great child performance by really everybody, but especially him.
Yeah, Spielberg definitely knows how to cast children well, I feel.
And get the best out of them.
Exactly. Pick the right child actors that don't seem inauthentic at all. So, yeah, I think this is a great movie to start off with around friendship. I feel that definitely the magic of Et in this film and the powers that he has definitely do represent a lot of like the importance of friends and what they can do. Et can heal you, and a lot of times when you're hurt, not necessarily physically, but emotionally, you might be in a hurt state. Then okay, your friends can be there to heal you. The whole theme around communication as well, and Et phoning home and trying to have that connection there too. And two, like that Elliot and Et, they have that sort of shared feelings where when Et is at home and he starts drinking beer and gets drunk, Elliot feels it too. And it's sort of this, they have this connection where they have total empathy for one another. Like anything that Et feels, Elliot feels. Anything that Elliot feels, Et feels. And as great friends, like that is what you have complete empathy for this person. You care about them. You care about their feelings. When they're upset, you're upset because they're upset. When they're happy, you're happy because they're happy. And I think that is what Et.'s magic, I think, is definitely representative of that. And you're right, Elliot is totally alone. Like his brother has a bunch of friends. They're hanging out. He has a younger sister, but that's a sister is a different thing. Like he doesn't have any friends. There's no sense in this film that he has anyone other than himself. And yeah, you're right, his dad just left, so Et really is there then to come in and be like, I am your friend now. I am able to give you the friendship love that you're not getting from anyone else. And maybe even too like that family love too. Your dad's gone, your brother's kind of always fighting with him a little bit, your mom's kind of struggling to keep everything together. So I think everything you said about how he represents that love. And it's the scene at the end when Et.'s almost dead and Elliot basically, it's like a Sleeping Beauty or something, he's like, I love you, Et, and then that's what brings him back to life. So the power of Elliot's love as and friendship for Et actually brings him back. So I do think there's a lot of great parallels there. As a film, it's interesting because like this movie was huge in the 80s. So it was definitely like amongst my friends, a movie that was very popular. I just never really took to it, honestly. Like, I don't know. It was never a movie I liked. I always thought it was kind of boring when I was little. So I didn't watch it very often. It was when I took a Spielberg class in college, actually, that I learned to more like appreciate the movie than love it. And it's interesting too. Like every time I see it, I kind of like it less, oddly. I don't know what that is. It's just that this movie, for some reason, never really landed in the same way that I guess it did for the rest of, my generation and society, because the movie was a huge hit. I will say, though, the third act, like when the kids, they rescue Et and they have that whole bike chase thing, is just a phenomenal sequence. The music, the action, like that part is like, every time I almost like get more and more invested in what's going on. I'm like, oh my God, they're, trying to get away from the police and the NASA guys and the federal agents. And that part still really does it to me. And the score is just unbelievable. But yeah, like, I don't know. I can't really explain why this movie has never really like resonated with me ever since I was.
Because you're weird. You don't like Et. What can I say?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's totally, it totally, definitely could be that. It's not like I hated it. It's just like, yeah, Et is Et. Like I would have rather watched some other films growing up. But it was fun definitely to come back to it and view it in this lens of friendship, which I think is the main theme of the entire film, and a beautiful encapsulation of the love between friends, even though one is a human and the other one is an ET. Like it doesn't matter where you came from, what your background is, you know, even if they don't speak the same language really throughout most of the film, but they speak the language of friendship. Not to be too cheesy, but that's what that language is, you know. It's an intergalactic language of friendship and love. So yeah, ET. So I'm glad we talked about this. I think it's a good way to start off the list.
And I'm glad too. All right, what's your number 3?
So to keep it on the theme of aliens, another movie with aliens, The World's End from 2013. This is a film directed by Edgar Wright, written by Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, starring Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and Martin Freeman, and some other folks. IMDb plot summary: 5 friends who reunite in an attempt to top their epic pub crawl from 20 years earlier, unwittingly become humanity's only hope for survival. So this movie to me, and why I put this on my list, is it represents to me a tight group of friends that you have in your youth. So these French, that the movie starts out going through their friendship in high school. They were very, very close, all these guys together, and then they kind of went their separate ways in life. And this movie's about them reuniting, trying to, you know, like the plot summary said, kind of recapture this pub crawl that they couldn't finish when they were in their teens. And this is something, you know, I mentioned at the top of the episode. You know, I have friends that I've known for a very long time, since high school. Other friends that I was, you know, friendly with in high school, but, you know, I see them every so often. And I think what this movie does is captures that when you get back together with those friends, even if you haven't seen them for a very long time, you went through some stuff as youths. And you're able to kind of fall right back into that bonding, that you feel like you're friends again. Like that hasn't been 20 years since time has passed. Even though time has passed, people have changed, but there is still something that binds you together. And I think it is a lot about nostalgia. You know, this movie is all about, we want to recapture that one amazing night. And, you know, I definitely in various friend groups along the years, you know, there's typically talk of that one time this thing happened and this happened and this happened, and we all kind of experienced it together, and we reminisce about that all the time. And this movie is definitely about that nostalgia that you have as friends, because, you know, sometimes your friends, yes, there is a bond and there are things that connect you with these people, but sometimes it's just an experience. You all went through something together, whether it is this attempted pub crawl in this movie, or whether it is, you know, you were on a particular team, or a particular group, or a particular class, or just the experience of growing up together. It happened to be placed in, you know, living near one another, and now you went through this, and you can go back and reminisce about those things. It's that bond that you have through reminiscence. I think what this movie does really well in setting up. You know, there's even the plot of this film, it ends up being that the town that they go back to, there's some aliens that have been like replacing people, like a Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So there's a scene where they all have to basically prove that they're the real them and not like a replacement robot. And they're going through and they're all talking about specific adventures that they had where only the other person would know. So again, it's like friendship in that sense is being used as a plot point, but it is that meaning that your friends they know things that you've done and experiences you've had that maybe no one else does, because you didn't want to tell anyone else because it's kind of embarrassing or what have you. So I think that it does a really good job of saying that. And two, I think a lot of the it's a lot of male bonding and male friendship represented here. So talk of crazy times, like competitiveness and kind of making fun of one another, having silly nicknames for each other. A lot of that sort of ribbing is a way that, men, sometimes it's the only way they can, say you love someone as a friend, is to kind of make fun of them and josh them a little bit. And this movie, I think, does a good job of capturing that as well. That dynamic between these friends and that competition is something I've definitely felt in groups of my male friends too. And the movie I think is okay. It's not one of my favorite Edgar Wright movies, to be honest. It's interesting actually. He does such a great job of blending genre into his different films. And this is the first movie. So there's other ones of Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead in this trilogy that he had. I think those movies work better as complete films. This movie, interesting, as I watched it, it's like, I don't even really, the alien part actually is the least interesting. If they had just stuck to the actual plot of these friends getting back together and the main
I'm
character.
so with you.
Like that piece was so interesting. And I wish the entire movie had kind of been that. It almost felt like the genre that he was inserting in here kind of got in the way of a movie that might have been better had it not had that.
I agree.
But, I still enjoy this film. And, again, think it really does capture friendships that I've had that are about going through things together, where even if 20 years has passed, you can reminisce about those crazy times that you had with these other folks.
No, I feel like I have nothing to add here on everything that you said. Totally agree on the movie as well. I don't think I'd seen this movie before, so it was kind of my first time watching this movie. I had seen the other one that Seth Rogen and gang did, which is similar to this.
Oh yeah, End of the World or something. I never seen that.
End of the World.
Yeah,
like
the
that.
World's End. No, this is World's End. Yeah, it's something about the world ending. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, for the time, at least I had a good time in the theater when I watched it. It was fun, but I hadn't seen the original, so I was happy to check it out. I'm okay on Edgar Wright. Like, it's a very specific tone. Sometimes it works, sometimes it just doesn't. But I had a good time watching it. I agree with you that the whole alien stuff sort of becomes distracting and tiresome as the movie goes on a little bit. But the performances by everybody, they're great. Everybody is really, really committed. And then on the friendship piece, yeah, I totally hear you on that. I have so much of that as somebody who doesn't live in the country that I grew up in and, went to school in and such. There's so many people from that time of my life with whom really all I have left in common is just nostalgia. There are very few people in that group that have sort of grown and evolved in the same direction and same way that I have. So all there is left is really talking about, oh, remember that time that happened, which is fun. Obviously, from a very, very young age, as you probably know, because you know me, was always more interested in depth and, sharing of ideas and opinions and thoughts and, bearing each other's souls and such, because I've sort of viewed my friends as family. So it's not that I don't give too much stock into nostalgia. I do, for sure, but I think the other stuff ranks much higher for me. And we'll talk soon about my next movie, which is probably a good segue as to how sometimes that nostalgia can kind of just wear off as time goes by. That said, what can never be changed is those experiences that you've had with those people, and they're linked with you no matter what. They may not be a big part of your life anymore, but that's okay. Everybody plays a very important role in your narrative, and you play an important role in other people's narratives. And I think that's what friends do. So it's a complete life that sort of is put together, with all these different relationships. And I think this movie does a very good job of kind of showing that.
Yeah, it's actually interesting too. Like the very end of the film, the Simon Pegg character, who's the main character, who was the one trying to get his friends back together, who hadn't seen in 20 years, ends up with basically robotic versions of his friends at 18. Sort of, I think, showing that he never was able to get beyond that nostalgia connection that you mentioned. All that it was that those friends were to him were experiences that he wanted to recapture. And I think in the movie, it's not like they all become friends at the end again. They never recapture that. What he's left with is just physical embodiments of the memories that he had of his friends, sort of showing, I think, he wasn't able to build any kind of deeper connections. For better or for worse. I don't think that movie's necessarily commenting on one way or the other, but it's saying this character clearly, his friends are only those nostalgic memories. So therefore, all that he's left with is 18-year-old versions of them as robots. Exactly. That he can then, that is where he's the most happiest. He actually then, that's where he's sober now. He's cleaned up. He's a better version of himself because he's able to get those 18-year-old friends back, not the 45-year-old friends that he actually has. It's just, it's kind of a weird, maybe that's where the genre stuff can kind of work. I don't think you'd really express that in a way if there weren't robot invaders, but it is very interesting. I think the movie is trying to say he was ever able to, were these really even deep bonds that he had in the first place? Or is it just all memories? Because that's really the things that saved him in the end.
Exactly. Yeah. And you said this earlier, I'm no expert, obviously, but I see this a lot around me, is that I don't know why it is that men have trouble with that. Men definitely have trouble with opening up, being vulnerable. And I think that's the key word, vulnerability, because there's so much of societal pressure around men shouldn't be vulnerable. And I think it really holds a lot of men back. And one area where it holds them back, I think, is in their friendships, because they're unable to really form deep connections, and all they're left with is just sort of hangout stuff, and are unable to express what other people mean to each other. Again, this is no judgment. It just sort of is how it is, you know. And I think this movie does capture that, like you said, that he's just stuck with these memories. And when you meet all these people in their 40s, you're almost like, why are you even friends? You shouldn't be friends,
of course.
Actually.
Right. At least
because
we've all gone in separate directions.
Yeah,
there was nothing that was
nothing in
you.
common.
Exactly. Right. They hadn't stayed in touch. None of them really had.
Yeah.
And I think that is, there is definitely a gender dynamic in this for sure. That I've definitely felt just as a guy that, it is, there is, I don't know, it's like society pressure expectations, but it is just a thing that is a lot harder to be vulnerable with friends, period, especially like male friends, because it's just not something you're supposed to. Vulnerability in a male is seen as a negative thing. And a weakness, which it shouldn't, but I think that's how society, at least the society I grew up in.
That's what I mean. No, it's pretty universal, which is why I think I struggle on the opposite side, because all I wanted to be was be vulnerable. And I always felt that wasn't being reciprocated, or I wasn't able to find my kind of people. And I've, for a while, just felt that, maybe I'm the weird one, but which, just let's face it, maybe I am. But
no, I've definitely struggled with that too. But maybe our other films, I'll definitely be touching on that in the other films that I have coming up on my list. And speaking of which, why don't we jump into to your number 2 movie that shaped your meaning of friendship?
All right. So my number 2 is The First Wives Club from '96, directed by Hugh Wilson, starring Goldie Hawn, Bette Midler, Diane Keaton, Sarah Jessica Parker, a bunch of other great people. Quick logline: you're reunited by the death of a college friend. 3 divorced women seek revenge on the husbands who left them for younger women. Sorry. That would be a different movie. Which I would love to watch.
That should be the remake of this, where all the men leave them for younger men.
Well, that's Grace and Frankie, sort of, but yeah.
Right. They've already done that. Okay, well.
But yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that we were talking about builds in this movie, where these are women, and to me, what this movie represents is that joy of madness of being with people that you've known earlier in your life, or maybe your whole life. And when you put them back together, what happens? And I think, because I think women are willing to be a lot more vulnerable, this movie always struck a chord with me, because I really felt that, if I were kind of put back in place with people that I grew up with, and if they were also vulnerable the way I like to be, some really fun stuff and mad stuff would happen. And I think that's what this movie really shows. I also think this movie really does a great job in demonstrating what it is to work on a project with your friends. They are sort of on this project of kind of taking revenge on their husbands or ex-husbands. And I find that very interesting, like including this podcast.
I was going to say meta commentary now.
Exactly.
You're making meta commentary.
Yeah. Working on something with your friend. And I think and I've had many of those experiences through school and work and such, and brainstorming sessions and what have you. And it's really great, right? Because you're working with somebody with whom you share a connection with. You obviously know them to a point, and especially when you're working on something together as friends and you connect on something, that joy is multiplied, by like 1,000 times, as opposed to if you were doing that with like a stranger person, because you're sort of building on the shared foundation that you already have with them. On the flip side, though, you also discover and are reminded of the things that annoy you about your friends as you're working with them, which can be infuriating in many ways. And this is why when you have a good relationship with them, you call them out for who they are and what they did. But you're able to do that because you have that trust with them and you have that shared foundation. And sometimes things do get fiery and hot and heavy. And that's when you have to kind of, go overboard and save it, because you have to ask the question that this thing that we're arguing about, does that really matter? What really matters here is the friendship that we have. And this is where you let go of what you should be letting go of. And I think the Bette Midler, Goldie Hawn relationship and friendship, what happens with them is very emblematic of that, I think, in this movie. The other thing that I love about this movie also is that this theme of there's no pretense between good friends. You can start with that for a little bit, but good friends will strip you off of that pretense, whether you like it or not. And I love that. I think friends are truth tellers. They tell you the things that are ugly no matter what. And it's a little bit of the joshing thing that you were talking about earlier. But to me, this is deeper. It's not, there's joshing in there, but it's really more of, I'm going to put up a mirror in front of your place and really tell you.
Right.
It's coming from a place of tough love, really, to kind of show you how things really are. And, this movie is sprinkled with moments of that throughout, but especially that first long brunch to lunch to cocktails to dinner scene that they all have after their friend's funeral, where they're reconnecting and everybody is prim and proper in the beginning, but by the end of it, everything sort of just falls apart and everyone's laughing and everyone's giving each other shit. So I just love that about this. So yeah, the movie is heightened. Obviously, the whole revenge plot is funny, sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work, but who cares? I think what makes this movie work to me is the women, who are amazing, brilliantly cast. It's just such layers and layers of character, maybe not so much in the writing, but just in their performance, where you just believe that these people know each other. And there's sort of like a dark sadness to the movie too, because the movie really starts with Stockard Channing committing suicide, which is really dark and sad. And on days when I watch this movie, when I'm feeling a little bit off, it's really moved me that, somebody was in such pain would do such a thing, and their last wish is to unite their gang back together. There's something very moving and sweet and dark about it. So I think the shadow of that is throughout the entire movie, if you can see it, because the movie is pretty slapstick. But yeah, it's one of those repeat watch movies for me, which is a comfort movie. It brings me a lot of joy, laugh out loud, funny moments. So yeah, I highly recommend it. But at the heart of it, it's a great friendship hang movie.
No, yeah, definitely. The three lead actresses, I think the movie basically just depends on that working or not.
Exactly.
And the chemistry is there between them, and all three of them are just great actresses on their own. And I think they have the good chemistry together as well. Yeah, so this is a movie I'd never seen before. It was, my sisters always liked it growing up, and I just never had, not that I was avoiding it. It just never had been something that I'd ever put on. But I've been curious about it. I think it was, successful at the time, and I think they made a play of it or something at one point. So it definitely has like a cultural resonance. But yeah, it didn't really work for me beyond the three lead actors. Like, I felt that the tone was very odd. Like, again, starting with that suicide to me was just something that didn't feel like it then fit in what the rest of the movie was doing. Just a lot of odd, like, director choices too. Like, all the Star Wars wipes in it for some reason just struck me kind of weird. I really, the music I really just disliked, and I was shocked to find out it was Oscar-nominated score. I was like, it noticeably was like hurting my enjoyment of the film, how bad, or not bad, like how out of place and just overdone the score was. Yeah, like, I think the women's scenes the three of them together were great. The actual plot with them, like with the husbands, I just didn't think like the movie, other than Diane Keaton's husband, the guy from Seventh Heaven, who like basically ran away with her with their like therapist. The other two guys, I was like, okay, I don't know why they deserve to get like pummeled at all for anything here. I felt that it was like they were trying to play the victims too much, and they weren't, it was both people's fault. I think that their marriages didn't work out. Other than, again, Diane Keaton was a different story. So it felt like that whole plot thing was like sort of too extreme, where I was kind of like, I know that I was siding with the men, but I was like, at least the story should have all three of them kind of be scummy guys and not just the one of them. But it wasn't like the worst thing I'd ever seen. I just didn't, it didn't really work for me beyond like the three performances. But I think all the things you talked about in terms of friendship representation was definitely there. So I don't disagree with you on that. The film just didn't Yeah, it didn't work for me. In a weird way, I was kind of disappointed by it just because I guess in my head, it was built up as something that, oh, at least this is going to be like a Runaway Bride or like a Notting Hill or like, a 90s romantic comedy, which is a genre that I can definitely enjoy. But yeah, I don't know. This just for some reason just didn't land with me.
Well, clearly somebody sold it to you wrong because this is not that movie. This is not a Notting Hill Runaway Bride.
There's
90s.
a dance sequence to a Motown song at the end of the movie. I mean,
Sure.
that if you have to put that in every 90s film.
Right.
And I thought their dance
movie.
sucked. But yeah, I know.
No, this movie is a lot more slapstick. It's sort of more in the Ruthless People kind of, vein as opposed to a romantic comedy vein, which is why a lot of it doesn't make that much sense, but it's not supposed to, So I think the only way this movie can be enjoyed, I think, is without intellectualizing it at all. But if this was sold to you in a different way, because rom-coms have heart, but they'd also have like an intellectual sort of storyline plot that for the most part makes sense. Here, I don't know if it makes total sense and all the flaws that you're pointing out, but I think that's not the point. So, and also I think this is a movie, it depends on when you first watched it. I watched it when I was, I think, in my late teens, because my mom must have put it on or something. So
that's when it came out. We were in our late teens,
right? Yeah. So it sort of stayed with me, for a long time. So there's a little bit of that too. Like watching this movie now in the age we are, and if it's sold to you the way it was, I'm not surprised that it didn't land on you. But
I was surprised. I thought I was going to enjoy this more than I did, I guess. But the performances. I think if the movie was trying to bring three great actors together and get the chemistry there, like it definitely did that. Like and those are some of my favorite like female actors.
So good.
Yeah, Bette Midler's great in this too.
She's
yeah,
great.
I don't know. It just didn't. I'll have to wait for the remake where the women are left or the husbands leave them for other men. That I would watch.
That would be amazing.
I'll have to noodle on this. I think there's some we can add this to the list of came up with a couple movie ideas over the course of this podcast so far. We'll put this one in it too. When we start our production company at the end of our podcast, the movies that shaped us production company, this can be one of our projects. We'll shop around.
Love it. Done. All right. What's your next?
So my number 2 film of movies that shaped my view of friendship is Ghost World from 2001. This is a movie written and directed by Terry Zwigoff, based on a comic by Daniel Clowes, starring Thora Birch, Scarlett Johansson, Steve Buscemi. The plot is, with only the plan of moving in together after high school, 2 unusually devious friends seek a direction in life. As a mere gag, they respond to a man's newspaper ad for a date, only to find it will greatly complicate their lives. Kind of a weird summary of this movie, but I think this movie and what it does so well for me when I watch it is show how, friends, you can be incredibly close to somebody, share the same worldview, the same interests, the same, sense of self. But those things can change if the other person starts changing their worldview. People can drift apart as friends, and a friend that you thought you would never lose, all of a sudden now like you feel like you don't even really know the person anymore because they don't really know you, because one of you have changed. I think this movie is around 2 females, Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson. Thora plays Enid, who's kind of the main character, I guess. Right away you see them as, actually you see her as an outsider. There's an opening sequence where it's like panning across an apartment building, and there's all these like typical kind of setups in there of someone watching TV, someone cooking for their kids, and then you see her just dancing around crazy to this Bollywood film, which is sort of saying, okay, she's part of this milieu, like a Rear Window kind of situation, but she stands out. She's the odd one. Then you meet her friend Rebecca, who's Scarlett Johansson, and they're both kind of odd together. They're making fun of the popular kids in school. They're saying, "Oh, graduation's stupid," as a graduate from high school. They're swaying to the same music together. I mean, you can tell they have a bond, and it's this worldview of sort of seeing everything as fake, kind of like a Catcher in the Rye sort of vibe of like, oh, mainstream society, commercialization, all these things are, who wants them? Screw it. Like, we're going to do our own thing. And they have a really strong bond because of that. And then when, Rebecca, who's Scarlett Johansson, she gets a job. She starts going off into the quote unquote real world now. She's graduated from high school. She's trying to find an apartment. She's kind of integrating herself into this quote unquote normal society that as high schoolers, they were both fighting against. And then Enid is and kind of going the opposite direction. She's being more drifted away from quote unquote normal society, finding a friend in an older male who's an odd duck himself, like is obsessed with records and old timey things, which again is he's part from society, but that is what Enid is attracted to because that is her essence and how she views the world. And as Rebecca kind of goes into society, Enid is then kind of left there without a friend, and she basically ends up at the end of the film kind of leaving off on a bus to go off, and just because she can't fit into society and she has no one with her anymore because Rebecca has. There's a scene in the film where Rebecca invites her over to this apartment that they were going to rent together. And before they were kind of making fun of weird people in cafes and wanting to always go to like a sex shop because they thought it was funny. And that was like their humor. And now she finds fascinating a ironing board that comes out of the wall. And like, that is like the coolest thing to her, which, earlier in the film, Rebecca would have said, this is the dumbest thing. Why would anyone think it's cool? She now thinks it's cool. And that's a really realization, I think, for Enid of like, wow, like we've really drifted apart as friends. And now I have to go off into the world on my own because this friend is no longer someone who shares the same worldview. So, in terms of friends, I do think this movie shows what bonds people together. But then also as people change and evolve over time, if that bond is a shared worldview and those things change, you unfortunately do drift apart, even though you maybe never have thought that could happen. So it's kind of sad in a way. But at the same time, it's, these people are two individuals going on their own paths. And if Rebecca's path ends up being, a normal kind of like suburban life as part of the system, and that makes her happy, that's great. And if Eden needs to kind of be outside of that and kind of drift along and be more on the fringes of quote unquote normal society, then hey, that's fine too. The movie's not making any kind of judgments either way. It's just kind of showing the breakup of friendship. So that's why I think this movie is important in terms of showing that that friendship between these two girls. It's kind of sad to watch it change, but I think again, it's like that's life sometimes. I think this is enigmatic. A lot of friendships that I've had that no longer have. I have a lot of friends that I've been close to for a certain period of time, maybe in college and high school, and then definitely drifted apart. Not for any fault of, there wasn't a falling out necessarily. And just like in this movie, it's not like Enid and Rebecca get in some huge fight. I mean, yeah, there are fights that they get into. But it's just they change and you grow up, and that sometimes you do grow apart. And I've definitely felt that with certain, again, I'd see so and so on the street again or want to wish them well and hope that they're doing okay. But it's not like you no longer feel that bond with them anymore. And that's something that's harder to kind of describe what that bond is sometimes, of why you feel connected to somebody, in the same way that it might be mysteriously appear, kind of like an E.T., right? These people just come together, E.T. and Elliot. They don't really know why, but they're together. In the same way that feeling can go away as well. And then now you're no longer close to this person, even though, you still care about them in some way. So I've definitely had those friendships before where you felt really close to someone and now, no really longer talk to them anymore.
Yeah.
I think this movie does a good job with that.
Yeah. Like I was saying, for folks that I grew up with and went to undergrad with and such, this movie definitely reminded me a lot of that, we would go do stuff together. I don't even know in that moment if I was fully into it. Maybe I was sort of, not so much, but I faked it anyway because we were together. And then as time went on, I took on my own stuff and they took on their own stuff, and that's totally fine. So I think this movie does a great job of kind of doing that. I'd never seen this movie before. I'd heard about it. It was a bit of a tough watch. Part of it also is that not just the sadness of it, but this world and what Enid is drawn to. Not that I only want to watch people who are likable. Of course not. Like I'm more than happy and maybe even happier watching people who are unlikable and complicated, which is sort of how she is. I don't know. Maybe there's something about the writing or something about her performance or something about the way the movie's directed. It sort of straddled this line between I would get pulled in the performance, but then often the whole thing felt like a play to me. Then I would sort of lose interest and sort of then pull back in. So it was a very kind of a yo-yo like experience of watching this movie. And I don't know, maybe it has to do with I guess the directing, perhaps, that maybe more time needed to be spent in really creating this world and fleshing it out, and not just feeling it a little bit surface level. But then maybe that's intentional, because the people that we are meeting here are also kind of like that. So maybe that's intentional, but I don't know. It took me a while to kind of get inside this movie and really be with it. Maybe there's a performance thing too. I think Scarlett Johansson's performance is quite weird, and maybe that's just intentional. But I just was like, what is happening? What are you doing? This very odd. The only person who stands out to me is Steve Buscemi, who is, I think, gives a great performance. Just, and that's what great actors do, even if the writing and the directing is not up to the mark, is that it's a very fleshed out, layered performance. You can see what has been up with this person, versus with the two girls, it's sort of hit or miss. But again, maybe that's intentional, because they are also finding themselves at their age. So that's when we are meeting them. So I don't know. I found this movie challenging. That said, it definitely captures that theme of, being together with people and then just falling out or losing out with them. So yeah.
Yeah, I can see the hard, like, this movie kind of being, like, interesting to kind of connect with. I guess for me, like, this film, I was kind of predisposed to like it. I feel very connected to, like, every character in it, and almost feel like this movie is like very personal to, like, me as who I am as a person. So I think it was then easier for me, because I saw myself represented in almost every character, sort of facets of my own personality. It makes it then easier for me being able to look beyond.
I felt that watching it, and I knew why you are drawn to it. Actually, I know you well enough.
I was gonna say, like, if maybe this is a future episode we'll do, but if someone were to say, like, a total stranger, like, give me a couple movies, and if I watch those movies, I know who you are, for sure this movie would be in here. Like, this movie kind of defines my identity in a lot of ways, that every time I watch it, it's even, like, more impactful to me for that reason. For some, but I think that makes it easier for me to kind of look beyond some things that might be harder for you to connect with, in terms of the directing and the writing. But it's a movie, again, that just reminds me a lot of those friendships that are no longer in.
Yeah, and I get why this is personal to you, and I definitely have those movies. If I see myself in them, then I'm willing to ignore a lot of the flaws of those movies. So this sounds like it's definitely one of those for you. But it's a great kind of time capsule of that time as well. Record stores and records and coffee shops of that kind feel kind of new. The whole setup is so amazing in that sense. And I only wish that, well, now this movie would not get made, or maybe, but
I don't know.
I wish somebody, a better director with a more deft hand, had directed this. This movie would be a masterpiece, honestly. But still I'm glad I checked it out, though.
Cool. Okay. What is your number one movie that shaped your views of friendship?
All right. So my number one is Good Will Hunting, directed by Gus Van Sant. Has to be mentioned, written by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, starring Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and Robin Williams, Minnie Driver. Quick logline: Will Hunting, a janitor at MIT, has a gift of maths, but needs help from a psychologist to find direction in his life. So I put this movie as my number one, which is probably not a surprise after everything that I've been saying, that to me, the relationship between Robin Williams and Matt Damon is sort of my ideal friendship, where friends are confidants, they are mentors, they push you, they challenge you, they make you see who you really are. It gets uncomfortable, but there's also love, support, vulnerability, all of that. Like, this is what I look for in friendships, and I've been lucky to find a couple, because it's so rare to find those relationships. And I think this movie does such a brilliant job in showing that. But it also contrasts it with the other kind of friends that you have, like the friends that we've been talking about through our podcast today, which is friends who you grew up with, you maybe don't have much in common with, but you hang out every day or every other day. There is this unsaid support system that you have with them, but most likely you are going to go separate ways because you really don't have much in common, which doesn't make those friendships invaluable. They're very much part of your narrative, your story, your journey. You wouldn't actually be seeking out those deeper friendships if you don't have those foundational, that foundational framework of friendship to begin with. So I think it's such a great contrast between Ben Affleck, Casey Affleck, and all those guys who hang out with Matt Damon versus Matt Damon and Robin Williams' relationship. Even though it's the context of the movie is very different, but to me, from the first time I watched this movie, I think I was probably in my 20s, and now it's like a yearly watch. Whenever I'm craving that kind of sort of deeper, vulnerable, and I want to have an ugly cry watching a movie. This is that one of those movies that, even though it's sad and melancholic, but it's kind of a balm for me because it reminds me of the power of friendship, of people like that when they come to your life, what they can do for you. And I love that even though it's a therapist and client relationship, it's a relationship of equals because Robin Williams also has a lot of bottled up issues, even though he's so eloquent about Matt's issues because he's great at his job. But I think the two end up pushing each other. The two end up showing that mirror to each other. So it's sort of the theme that we were talking about a little bit, even with First Vice Club. I think this pushes it much further and kind of has a more serious tone to it, obviously. So, but yeah, I love this movie. As a movie, I think it's almost a near perfect movie in my mind. And this is what we were talking about. The script is obviously very good. It's brilliantly acted by everybody, but in a lesser director's hands, this movie could have been very schlocky or very cheesy or very sentimental. And it is at times for sure. But I think Gus Van Sant, I don't know if people give him enough credit for this movie because there's so many other highs of this movie that take away all the credit, but he does such a great job all the way from establishing sense of place. Like, exactly where you're at. You're transported. Danny Elfman's score, the mise-en-scène that we talk about often in our podcast, it's just so perfect. The performances are so dialed in the right kind of way. Again, this movie can be kind of unbearable, honestly, if it didn't have like a good control on all these different pieces, which I think Gus Van Sant just does such a great job. Two things I'll mention before I hand it over to you. Every time I watch this movie, I'm once again reminded by how amazing Minnie Driver is. And I always forget after I watched the movie, which is so sad because it's Robin Williams and Matt Damon and then Ben Affleck, and the script and all of it and the Oscar, that sort of, stands up in your head. But Minnie Driver is so good in this movie. Their relationship, the way it sort of forms and the way it builds and the way it doesn't go anywhere, it's just so heartbreaking to me. And the other thing, slightly on a critical note, after watching this movie maybe the 50th time again in prep for this podcast, I just felt there's a little bit too much exposition. I wish there were fewer words said in various parts of the movie, then this movie would be kind of absolutely perfect for me. But that said, it's still a great movie. I love it. It's sort of it's in your neck of the woods. So
that's right.
Whenever I watch this movie, I always think of you too, in a way. So yeah.
Yeah, this movie's great. I hadn't seen it in a very long time, actually. I loved it when I first saw it when it came out in theaters in late 90s, then saw it a couple times in college, and just coming back to it now, like 15, 20 years later, it still just has all the power that it did when I first saw it. I mean, I think all the things you said about performances, definitely all across the board, great. But I do think that, yeah, with the Gus Van Sant angle, this movie walks a pretty fine line between being like too heart on its sleeve.
Yeah.
But then also like what tries to be realistic. But it does both. And I think that's a lot the credit to him. And I can't remember if this was Van Sant or one of the other producers, but the original like concept of this film when Matt and Ben were writing it, was it going to be like a thriller where Matt's character is going to try to be recruited by the CIA because he was like super smart, and this whole sort of like political thriller thing. And I can't recall, and this is maybe on me, like if it was Gus that was like, no, just like pull it all down, or whether that was like Kevin Smith, who was one of their friends, like someone gave them that advice to kind of strip it down to like just making it a story about this guy and escaping, South Boston. And I think that is what this, that other version of this movie just would have been not at all as good.
No.
But I think, again, I can't remember if that was Van Sant or not, but yeah, I think too, yes, Robin Williams, who I think is his best performance in anything.
Incredible.
And him and Ben, I'm sorry, Matt, chemistry is great. But I do also think, and watching this with friendship specifically, that the Affleck character too, I think at the right moments knows how to push Matt as well. And I was even thinking it, like there's a speech that he gives where they're at the construction site, and he's basically telling him, look, like this is my life, like I'm not a smart guy, like this is gonna be me forever, but like I know you're better than this, like you should do this, like it's kind of like for us, like our friends, like we kind of want you to kind of fulfill all the promise that you have, which we clearly don't feel like held back by us. And I was almost wondering like whether that moment, as much as Robin was kind of breaking things down for Matt and helping his character understand what his potential was, that it was that final shove from someone like really in his community that he grew up with, that maybe he never thought that Affleck would ever have that real heart to heart with him. And it was only when they had that moment, I feel like, because they were doing some, he bust him out of prison, or when he got into jail, like Affleck would be there to help him. He was helping Affleck with the guy at the bar where, that he was trying to like make fun of him, and Ben comes in and kind of dresses that smart Harvard guy down. So like they have that sort of that male kind of how males express those feelings of friendship, that is all there. But it's that moment where Ben is like, look, like, dude, I don't want you. I don't want to see you anymore. Like I wish that you would leave. And showing that real vulnerability and taking all of that things down and being a real friend. That moment in that scene really stood out to me because throughout the rest of that whole movie, they had walls up. Essentially, it was like that male friendship. And that was a real friendship moment when then they kind of tear that down a little bit. And he's like, no, dude, you gotta go. And
you're absolutely right.
At the end, when, he goes to his house, which is going to happen because they set it up, but it still is very moving, and he's not there. And Ben Affleck is like so happy that like his friend is finally doing what he always wanted him to do. It's a nice moment.
It's a really nice moment. No, you're totally right. I think without that, I don't think Matt takes that jump.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, well, who knows? But I feel like that is an important part of that journey for him too. As much as the Robin Williams piece, they both give each other a lot of that give and take. Like Robin ends the movie in a better shape. Like he's now going off and kind of not dwelling in his sadness anymore about his wife's passing because of what Matt's able to teach him. So they kind of give and take there. But the Ben Affleck piece, maybe just gotta love Ben Affleck, but I was focused a lot on that and watching this, and just that scene especially was really like showing how much he really loved him. He loved him so much to be like, you should leave. Like, don't be around me anymore. I don't want you to do this just to help protect us. Like,
and that's a much harder thing to do, letting go of somebody that you love, actually.
Yeah,
so
totally.
There's no truer form of showing love for somebody. So no, I totally agree. I'm glad that you enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, I love this movie. And it was like, I always knew I really liked it. And again, it had been so long since I'd seen it. It was great to kind of throw it back on and be like, no, this movie is just really a classic. One of the best films of the 90s for sure, and kind of deserves the reputation that it has. Which sometimes you go back to these films and it's like, oh, okay, well, this was great at the time and I get why this is so lauded, but like, it's not a classic. No, this is definitely for sure a classic. Yeah,
it really is. The last thing I'm going to say, I also just noticed this time watching this movie that when characters in this movie laugh and cry, like you were saying, it just is so real to me, especially laughing. I think it's much easier. I think, I'm not an actor, but to me, it sort of seems that it's probably easier to show genuine sad emotion that can, sweep you up. It's much harder to laugh as though you've heard this for the first time, even though you're probably on the 55th take.
Yeah.
And that whole sequence when Robin Williams is talking about how his wife used to fart in his sleep.
Oh, yeah.
And the way Matt laughs at that and the two laugh at it, it's just, again, this is texture. You could easily write this line off and it wouldn't hurt the movie, but it actually will hurt the movie because it brings these people together. But what you really see is just two people laughing like that. It's just so, I don't know, so wonderful to me. I laughed with it, was moved by it, on a moment like that, because that's what real friendships and relationships are based on. It's about the big moments, the nostalgia, the shit that you've been through, but to me, it's more about these moments, I think,
Yeah, I know. And I wonder if this movie had an advantage because it was written by two friends.
Yeah, of course.
Who,
I didn't even mention that. There's a whole meta commentary.
Totally. They've gone through their, in the last 20 years, their different peaks and valleys in their friendship. And I'm sure there's a lot that we don't even know because we're just looking at it from the outside. But I think this movie benefits from the writing and maybe even the performances too, that these are two guys who are in this together. They're both trying to go after the same thing, which is success in Hollywood as creative forces. And then, it is great to see them succeed too. This movie put them on the map, won them the Oscar, started both of their careers. And to have it come from this, bonding of, I'm sure they put a lot of their own relationships into those two characters, and as they were writing it, it just it lifts the movie to even another level, because that behind that are these two real friends that are really trying to come together and create something and accomplish something together, and then they did it, which is exciting too.
Exactly. And who doesn't love that success story, right?
It's great.
It's a great Hollywood story on its own, and small movie which is elevated. We talk a lot about the state of movies on this podcast, and this to me is a perfect example that a big movie doesn't have to be, with fireworks and what have you. It can be a small movie, but if it's done well, it doesn't feel small at all. It feels so big in its scope and in deep in its what it's trying to accomplish. So anyway, what's your number one?
Totally. Great. So my number one film that shaped my views of friendship is Pitch Perfect 2 from 2015. So this film's directed by Elizabeth Banks, starring Anna Kendrick, Rebel Wilson, Anna Camp, Haley Steinfeld. IMDb plot summary: after humiliating command performance at the Kennedy Center, the Bard and Bellas enter an international competition that no American group has ever won in order to regain their status and right to perform. So this is the second film in the Pitch Perfect trilogy. So folks that aren't familiar with this franchise, the movie revolves around a all-girl a cappella group, which is singing where you don't use any instruments, so it's only your voices. And this is the second chapter in that saga, if you will, of the Bard and Bellas, who are the team. So, the reason why this is my number one, and really this whole franchise actually means a lot to me on a number of different levels. But this shows how, a lot of different things, how friends can come together and share a similar passion to create something similar to Matt and Ben, as we were just talking about. They have this passion for screenwriting. These girls have a passion for singing and creating music. And it's a group dynamic. So every individual singer needs to come together to form the song together as a group. But they also really, in this film, I think, show that friends know what's best for you, even when you don't know it yourself. They don't have judgment. They're there for you during, hard times where maybe you need help, but they know you need help. You're too afraid maybe to ask for it, but they kind of get out for you anyway, and give you that help. And that you're always there for each other. I know we've talked a bit, about gender in this podcast already, but for some reason I've always been, I don't know about more appreciative, but I guess maybe jealous of female friendships, because they, I think, don't have that same distance that as men we're supposed to kind of have a little bit, don't really show vulnerability. Women, it's kind of the opposite. So I always gravitated more towards female depictions of friendship in film and TV. I think this movie and this franchise to me is sort of the ultimate encapsulation of that. So again, to get into some specifics that I was mentioning, it has some of the things that I talked about earlier of groups kind of ribbing on each other a little bit, but there is that sense of love. There's a scene where one of the main character, Anna Kendrick, is having problems at her job, and she calls her boyfriend, who's not there, to vent to. And then she's there kind of not happy, and her one of her group mates, the Rebel Wilson character, comes into the room, and she can tell there's something wrong. And Anna Kendrick just doesn't want to talk about it, but Rebel Wilson kind of presses on her. Is like, no, like, I know you need to open up. And then she does open up to her, and she gives her that support that she needs. And that is something too, that a friend is able to do that for you. Kind of know when you need to talk, even though you don't need to talk, and it isn't judgmental. She isn't, Anna Kendrick's kind of afraid that she might, because she's had this job, which might come in conflict with the group and her existence in this group. But, Rebel Wilson totally understands, like, look, this is something that, and I'm not going to let my own personal feelings get in the way of providing you the support that I need. So I think that moment is really, really touching there too. There's also, a scene where in the middle of the film, they're just having trouble kind of finding their voice, they call it, as a group. And they have to go off to this, camp that is run by one of their former friends, who are former members of the group. She graduated at the end of the last film, and she's able to be there and give them the support that they need too. A little bit of tough love, but also a little bit of showing them that they're all in this together, and that it's them coming together as a group. That is their voice. That I think they were missing a little bit earlier in the film. And another thing that I like about this film too, that is kind of rare about movies in friendship, I find, where it's not like this movie is about friends who are really together and then something happens and they're all fighting and kind of break apart and then need to come together in the end. And that's like a lot of narrative arc of movies about friends. This movie is not really that. They're never getting fighting and kind of saying, oh, I'm breaking up, I'm leaving the group, and then they have to kind of remember what's about that. No, they're always together. They're friends for life here. They're in this group, and no matter what happens, they're never going to abandon one another, even if there are hard times, which is something that I think is again kind of rare in friendship movies. And I like that this movie is about friendship but doesn't involve that plot thread. So, I think too why I picked the second film in this franchise, even though this one,
very curious about that.
Yeah, I think this one deals a little more with friendship than the other two. But another reason is a little bit of like a meta commentary too. It's like, you watch the first movie as a fan of the franchise, and you feel like you're part of this group with them. They're kind of like your friends. You get to know them. You feel that familiar bond. So it's like getting back together with your friends. You're coming back, it's the sequel, all these people, it's like hanging out with and not to sound kind of weird, like I have no friends and all my friends are in movies, but it's like you're watching these characters that you love and you sort of felt like you were friends with after watching the first film. So you get back together in the second one, it's like reuniting with all your close friends and seeing what they're up to now and rooting for them and having that sense of success when they succeed at the end of the film too. So I think that's something that in the first movie, knowing these people and you're kind of getting to know them, and the movie's about a lot of other different things than just the bonds of friendship. And I think that's why this movie, I picked the second one in the trilogy to kind of speak to. And, also again, like I just love the film overall. I'm a big sucker too for any movie that has any kind of international competition where it's sort of like it's a small world type thing where each country is a little bit of like a stereotype in themselves. I don't know why I always get a kick out of that. So I was excited when I realized like they were going to an international show. And, again, I just also big a cappella music fan. So related to the girls, then I was in a group myself, all male group, not all female. So that was definitely reminding me a lot of like what it's like to be in a group of people where you're all there, like creating music together. But yeah, like to me, I think this is the perfect encapsulation of friendship for me, at least, like in a movie that I've seen.
Good to hear. Yeah, I was curious why you picked this one as opposed to the first one. Yeah, everything that you said kind of comes across. I had watched this movie when it came out after the first one, loved the first one. I didn't remember much about the second one other than the whole German thing for some reason.
They were very funny, which is a rare thing to have funny Germans, but they're very funny. Yeah.
That's all I remember. But watching it again this time, I'm just sorry to say that I found this movie very dull.
Oh, interesting.
As compared to the first one, and just I was quite disappointed, honestly, and sad because in my mind, I watched the first one many times and I love it a lot. And I just felt this movie just felt really slow and boring, and the music was not good. Most of the songs are not as good as the first one. The dynamics and the jokes didn't quite land. There's just so many people in the group now, a new one, a this one, a that one. You don't really get to spend much time with a lot of the people in the group, which is not the case in the first one. Like you get a sense of everybody, versus here it's mostly sort of, Anna Kendrick's job, a little bit of Rebel Wilson, and then the other one,
Haley Steinfeld.
Haley Steinfeld,
the
basically.
new role, yeah.
The new one. So I don't know. I'm glad that I watched it again, but I was also just very disappointed. Maybe I watched it on a day where I was not in the mood. It's very possible, but that's just how this movie landed on me. But that said, though, the themes that you're talking about, I think they do come through. And I didn't think about that, but you're right. There aren't that many movies where there isn't a breakup happening between friends. And I think that is refreshing that they are together, because we've established that in the movie first
right,
movie.
exactly,
right. They are together. They actually do fall out in the first movie and then come back together. So we've done that. So I like that they didn't go back and do that all over again. But other than that, I did not like this movie.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I find the songs better in this one.
Really?
Yeah. I like the covers they do in this one better, and I think the end performance I like. Well,
did not like it. I like the first one so much better.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Have you seen the third one?
I have, but I don't have any memory of it.
That one's really disappointing. But also has another kind of like, there's a very great kind of friendship theme in that one too. But I feel like this is a stronger film, so that's why I picked over third one. Well, you like the first one better. That's I don't know if that's like I think that's probably what the general kind of consensus was at the time. But yeah, I just love this whole franchise and these girls, and I could watch this movie like just on a loop, just to be part of that world, to feel like I'm hanging out with them. Like I just want to hang out with them.
Yeah, that I do not disagree with. I think it'll be a great hang, and it's great. Like this movie did well, and as a franchise, it's pretty incredible. Are they going to make another one?
They're doing a TV show.
Oh gosh.
With Adam Devine. But I'm hoping at some point they'll go back. I feel like they could be making these forever. Even just like the concept, it doesn't have to be necessarily the same girls, which I also like how they are growing up in each film, and they're definitely progressing in their lives and careers, and different major life events are happening throughout each of the films. It's not like they're just stuck in the same situation, rinse and repeat. But well, speaking of other films, any other movies didn't make your list today?
Yeah, quite a few actually. Bridesmaids was a very hard one that I didn't include, but it's one of my all-time favorite friendship movies, which I know you do not like.
Thank you for making me not watch that one again. That movie I can't stand. Maybe at some point I will, and we can have a dialogue on it. But yeah, I'm not a fan of that movie in any way.
I love that movie. I can quote it and think about it pretty much on a daily basis. Ponyo, Frances Ha, I Love You Man, that we covered on another episode. Itu Mama Tambian. And yeah, what about you?
Me, it was other Edgar Wright films, Shaun of the Dead, the other Pitch Perfect 3, like I mentioned, Mallrats, Aladdin, Toy Story, Swingers, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Sideways. What are the other ones I was thinking about including? But
those last two are good ones too.
Yeah, but these are the ones I went with. Thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed our discussion of movies about friendship. And make sure you rate and subscribe, review on all podcast platforms. We definitely, ratings and reviews help us find more of an audience, so please do that. Also, tell your friends about us, any movie buffs or any of your friends actually, because it sounds about friends. Share this one. Hopefully we'll see you on the next episode, everyone. Goodbye, Karan.
Be good.